got the kotel behind him, Zan.
What? Sorry, we missed. Okay, maybe by accident. But Rabbi Benji, you are, we're recording you if that's okay, because we've got a few people that really wanted to hear you tonight but couldn't make it. So they've asked if we can record, so that we're all being recorded, just so you all know.
No problem at all. So I'll show you my father and son shaking the lulav and etrog here in Sukkah.
Oh, wow.
We slept in here last night. This is our Sukkah in Jerusalem. So welcome to my humble abode. It's great to welcome you guys into our Sukkah in Jerusalem. And I really commend each of you and thank you very much. And I appreciate the opportunity to learn with you again, especially on Hoshana Rabbah, which is actually my grandfather's yortzeit, my mother's father's anniversary of his passing. So learning in his honor. And it's a very holy day of the year. It's a very special time. And they talk about the idea that on Rosh Hashanah, the books of the living and the books of the dead are open, and Yom Kippur, they're closed. And then tonight, following Hoshana Rabbah is when the message is delivered, so to speak, of everything for the new year. So hopefully in the merit of our learning now, each and every one of you are guaranteed a beautiful, healthy, happy, successful year ahead. And not just for each of us learning here today, but really everyone around the world. I think humanity is in great need of some blessing. And we really pray for everyone around the world. So I was asked to, this week, we're starting the book of Bereshit. We're starting the Torah again. And so I was asked to sort of kick us off on an approach. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of split up the beginning of the Torah, the next three parshiot, the next three sections, into three scenes, sort of like Netflix episodes, and try and revisit them in the same way that I'm sure every single one of you are familiar with the general stories. There's stories that we probably learned first when we were in kindergarten or when we were in elementary school. But now, it's an opportunity to revisit it with our eyes. And I really encourage each and every one of us, especially with this extra time. Are you guys still in lockdown? Yes? With the extra time and opportunity, to try and, even just for the book of Genesis, if you can make it the whole year, or even just for this week, to try and learn each of the portions along the way. I'm sure Norm and Elisheva will be happy to guide anyone that wants. There's so many incredible resources on the internet. I actually have a website, rabbibenji.com, and there's a parasha, there's an idea for every single parasha that I just completed. You can just look at it with the art scroll, and just read the English, just read with the commentary, whatever you want. But I really encourage it. And to get us started, I thought, I'll share a few ideas, and I want to try and visit them sort of with fresh eyes. So, I'm asking everyone to sort of leave aside any preconceived notions of any of the stories that we've heard before, and I'm sure we have many, and to try revisit it from a fresh perspective. So I might actually share screen. Does that work? Yes. So I've just got the sources here. So we're going to start with Act 1, Scene 1, Adam and Eve, Genesis chapter 2 and 3. Does anyone actually want to read for us? So while someone musters up the courage to read, you can read in English, it's fine. You can read in New Zealander, it's fine as well. While someone musters up the courage, what we're going to do is we're going to split each of these three scenes. So you'll see, first is going to be Adam and Eve. Then we're going to do Cain and Abel. And then we're going to do Noah and humanity. And that's it, the three scenes. And what we're going to do is we're going to do each one. We're going to start off with the sin. And I'm going to ask you guys to frame the sin. I might do the first one, you'll get the sense, and then you guys do the next one, and the response. And in each one, I want to not just talk about the specific sin or the specific response, but rather the sin and the response that we can learn for all of humanity. Because ultimately, these were the prototype people. These are the first people of humanity. And there's many lessons we can all learn from these times. So does anyone want to read the first source?
Yeah, we have a brave volunteer here next to me.
No.
Elisheva.
Elisheva, go for it.
Am I reading the Hebrew? or the
No.
English?
נראה לי עדיף באנגלית.
Okay, that's
Much
not
easier.
my strong side.
Of course it is.
Okay, now the Lord God took the man and he placed him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to guard it. And the Lord God commanded man, saying, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat of it, for on the day that you eat thereof you shall surely die.
Okay, so we know what happens. We know that they eat from the tree, right? And so that's the first sin. Before we dive into the sin, I just want to start sensitizing you, because I saw every single person here wants to start reading the parasha every week, and it's the best time to do it because we're starting new. So to sensitize you, like, what would you say is the first mitzvah, the first command in the Torah, in the entire Bible? Anyone want to volunteer?
The doorposts.
Who was that? Sorry, just say who you are, because I've got it on the side here.
Hillel. That was Hillel.
Hillel. So what did you say was the answer?
So I mean, if I'm wrong, then please correct me. But when the Jews were leaving Egypt, wasn't the doorposts and the blood on the door?
Okay, excellent. Hillel, are you related to Rabbi Friedler?
I am. Yeah, I have a
Is he
bit of
your
a head
dad?
start here. He is my dad. Yeah.
Ah, please send him regards.
Oh well. Okay.
He was in Adelaide before, no?
Yeah. Yeah. It was
Yeah, please
Adelaide
send
a couple of years ago.
Awesome. Send him warm regards. So basically, he says the doorpost when the Jews were coming out of Egypt. Excellent. That's one answer. Another answer is a Chodesh Hazeh Lachem, right? To start counting Rosh Chodesh in Exodus. Often people say Puru Uvu, which is to be fruitful and multiply. But if you read these verses, like perhaps it is verse 16, the second thing here, right? First of all, everyone often will say, if you look at verse 17, if you say, what's the first thing we're told? It's you shouldn't eat from this tree, right? It's a very like Jewish concept. We go straight to the thing we shouldn't do. If I drew a piece of paper and put a dot on it and said, what's on this page? You'd say a dot, even though 99.9% of the paper is a white piece of paper. But the dot makes us, grabs our attention, right? So essentially, you know, we look at the stage that says you shouldn't eat from this, but the verse before 16 says, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat. It's a commandment. Go and enjoy my world. Be part of it. And you were placed in a pretty cool part of the world to enjoy the world around. The verse before says to serve and preserve, or to work and guard the land, right? There's so many things that we never really think about if you just sensitize yourself and start reading it anew. You know, the end of the 17th verse says, you should surely die if you eat from the fruit. Well, we know that Eve and Adam both ate from the fruit. So why didn't they die? Right? I want you guys to start asking these questions, to look for the answers. I'm not going to answer them now, but I want to sensitize us. So the first sin is that they ate from the tree. Why was it wrong? Should I do it less interactive, Norman and Elisheva?
I mean,
They've
we're
been told not to do it, so it was wrong that they did it.
Exactly. Who said that?
Adina.
Adina, perfect, right? Very, very simple. Why is it wrong to eat a tree? Like if you were in the tree, if you were in the garden, would you be able to intuit that you can't eat from a tree? Unless you've got like these godly powers, I don't think you would. But God said explicitly, eat from everything except for this. And therefore, the reason it was wrong to eat from that was for one reason and one reason alone, because God said so. And God is the only objective being in the world. And therefore, the only one that, without even explaining why it's wrong, God says it's wrong, right? Like if we were crossing a road and my 2-year-old child just wants to run in the road, I might just say, don't run in the road. I don't need to explain that someone may be driving and looking at their phone and not concentrating and therefore hit you and it can cost your life, because she may not be able to compute that information. I just say, don't run in the road. As she gets older, maybe I'll explain more and allow more. But on the first and basic level, don't run in the road, right? Objective morality, creating an objective rule or law, something that can help us. And that objective rule or law was established by God, the only objective being in the world. And therefore, it doesn't really matter what the reason is, but we need to appreciate that. Now, I can think of many things in the world that if we had objective morality, would have saved humanity in many ways. You think of Hitler, you think of Stalin, all these people that deified themselves, that created themselves as their own God. They're not exactly objective, right? But if there was an objective it is wrong to murder regardless. They had beautiful justifications in their mind. We're helping the human race. We're getting rid of people that are disabled, and that's going to help the human race. We're getting rid of people that are Jewish, and that's going to help the human race. We're getting rid of gypsies, and that's going to help the human race. We're going to refine the gene pool with this Aryan gene, right? They can justify it however they want. But the second that you don't have an objective morality, you have the capacity to decide that which is right and wrong. And the danger is this. And therefore, the first rule ever established is objective morality. And it's established by the only objective being that ever lives. And it's not established to a Jew. It's established to Adam and Eve, the first parents of all of humanity. What's the response, right? Does someone else, or maybe Elisheva finish off the response, and then we'll get someone else to read the next one.
Sure. And the Lord God called the man, and he said to him, "Where are you?"
No,
And
wait, just one second. What is, again, I'm going to ask questions. I'm not going to give the answers necessarily. Like, what's going on here? God called man and said, "Where are you?" God doesn't know where he is. Even if they were hiding in a bush, God can't see through a bush. Like, what does it mean when he's saying, "Where are you?" He knows where they are. Carry on.
And he said, "I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I am naked. So I hid." And he said, "Who told you that you are naked? Have you eaten from the tree of which I commanded you not to eat?" And the man said, "The woman whom you gave me to be with me, she gave me of the tree, so I ate." And the Lord God said to the woman, "What is this that you have done?" And the woman said, "The serpent enticed me, and I ate."
Okay, excellent. What's going on here with this response? It's very classic going on. What would you call this? What's the response?
Manipulation.
Who's that?
Pa-
Hillel.
Passing
Yeah.
on responsibility.
Yeah.
Excellent, Raymond. Right?
Yeah.
It's a classic blame game. The
Yeah.
man says the woman says the snake, everyone else is passing on the responsibility. So if we're defining categories, and I don't have a whiteboard here in my sukkah, but if anyone has notes, they can write it down, or you can just understand what I'm saying. So the first sin is objective morality. It's wrong because God said it's wrong and they break that. And the first response is a lack, because we're talking about the evolution of responsibility, is a lack of personal responsibility, i.e., I'm not taking responsibility for myself. By the way, the Hasidic masters say that ayeka, the term "where are you," actually wasn't a physical question. God knows they're hiding in a bush. It was, where are you? Like, what are you doing? Where's the real you? How can you get rid of this responsibility? I ask you to do one thing, right? We can ask ourselves that questions a lot when we do things that we really shouldn't be doing, and we can extend that question. But the lack of personal responsibility is the fundamental basis for the evolution of responsibility. If you are ever going to take any responsibility in any sense, the broad or the local, it always starts with oneself first. That's where we need to establish it. That's the end of Act 1, Scene 1. There's a lot more to see. I teased out a few of the questions, but we're going to jump to their kids, Cain and Abel. And Cain and Abel is a very sad story, but we're going to jump straight into the sin. I just picked 2 verses to show you. I'm going to ask someone else other than Elisheva, even though she read so beautifully, to read the next 2 verses.
I'm happy to read.
Okay, who's that? Sorry,
Adina.
Adina, go for it.
And Cain spoke to Abel, his brother. And it came to pass when they were in the field that Cain rose up against Abel, his brother, and slew him. And Cain said to the Lord, "Is my iniquity too great to bear?"
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Adina. I'm going to ask you to read the response as well after, because you read so beautifully. So Cain spoke to Abel, his brother. Okay, so again, do you guys mind me throwing in these random questions that have nothing to do with the shir to sensitize us? Okay, cool. So Cain spoke to Abel, his brother, and it came to pass, right, in the Hebrew, Vayomer Cain el Hevel, Cain spoke to Hevel, Vayhi biyotam basadeh, and it happened when they were in the field, right? So what's the question here? Does anyone have a question that jumps out at them? So my question is, what did Cain say? Anytime it says in the Torah, Vayomer so-and-so el so-and-so, right? Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, it then says what they say. If you're going to say, Cain spoke to Amos, like, and colon, open quotations, you expect to hear what they said, but it doesn't say what they said, right? So Rabbi Sachs beautifully says here that this shows that what's the litmus test of any relationship? It's good communication. You want to measure a relationship, you need to make sure that people are actually communicating. If people aren't communicating well, whether it's, you know, on a global level or whether it's on a local level, whether it's two partners or whether it's, you know, certain factions of the Palestinian and Israeli conflict or ultra Orthodox and Reform, all these different things, if they're not communicating, you can't expect any kind of, you know, unity going on there. And therefore, Cain opened his mouth, but he didn't know how to say anything. They had such a fractured relationship that the basic communication was broken down, right? You see it in the words. And it came to pass and he killed his brother. And then Cain said to the Lord, is my iniquity too great to bear? So is my sin too big for me? So my question is, what is the sin here? If the previous one was objective morality, how would you classify this one? So I would say, right, that it's, I would call it basically natural ethics. Why would I call it natural ethics? What tells me here? Because first of all, in the first one, we knew it was objectively wrong because God said it was wrong. But God doesn't say you're not allowed to murder here. It might sound obvious to us now, living in the 21st century, that you shouldn't murder. But how do we know you shouldn't murder? And if we know that, what tells me from the last verse that I brought here, that at the end of the day, you know, Cain and Abel recognized that what was done was wrong. Cain or Abel. So the last verse says, and Cain said to the Lord, is my iniquity too great to bear? Cain is basically saying, my sin's too much. I feel what I've done is wrong. How could Cain say that if he was never told it was wrong, right? You know, when you do something wrong and you know it's wrong, you've got this conscience inside you that's pulling on you, and you know it was wrong. You can feel what you've done is wrong. And that's exactly what happened here. And it's reflected in the verse, because Cain says explicitly, is my iniquity too great to bear? He feels what he's done is wrong. And that's why I call it natural ethics, because he naturally intuited it. The Torah breaks up, you know, commandments into two categories, chok and mishpat, right? Those laws that we wouldn't know if it wasn't for God, right? If you were put on a random island and you wouldn't necessarily work out what animals should be kosher and shouldn't be kosher. You wouldn't necessarily work out that the seventh day from sunset till the end of it, when the stars come out, you need to rest, and you need to rest in these ways. You might intuit certain parts. It's good for humanity to rest. It's good for humanity to be disciplined when they eat and what they eat, etc. But to that extent, no. But I think that naturally, even if you were put on a desert island and you saw someone fall, you'd want to help them get back up. You wouldn't think it's right to murder, to steal, right? These are things we can intuit. So it's what we call natural ethics. And what's the response? Adina, can you carry on for us, please?
And the Lord said to Cain, where is Abel your brother? And he said, I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? And he said, what have you done? Hark, your brother's blood cries out to me from the earth.
Okay, very powerful. Just by the way, in the Hebrew is better because it says, Kol demei achicha, the bloods, my brother's bloods cries out in the plural. And so there's two reasons why it's bloods. I'm not going to go into now, but each of the words here have profound meaning and profound depth. So what would be the response? If the first response was a lack of personal responsibility, how would you define the response now?
It's a bit arrogant. I mean,
Sorry, yeah.
It comes across as being a bit arrogant in a way. But Benji, my question though is, so far, if you see, there was no other person who died. So would he have even known, like, maybe he was angry and he hit his brother, and he may not have probably even realized that hitting him would result in death, because that was the first death that happened, isn't it?
So would he have known like this is what was going to happen? So that could have been one of the reasons why he even responded like that. So it sounds as being arrogant.
Okay, arrogant. And yeah, I mean, the one argument is to say what you did. One of the reasons it says bloods, by the way, is because they say that he was actually trying to hurt him, kill him, but he didn't know how. So he like hit him in all these different places with a rock. It was pretty gory and disgusting. And that's why it was bloods in the plural, right? But essentially, but what you're saying is 100% right. Like there's a certain arrogance here. But arrogance implies that you don't care about the person next to you. It was the first episode of fratricide, which means a sibling killing another sibling. But not just that, it was the first episode of murder ever, as you're saying.
Correct.
I don't know what your name is, Miss White. Mrs.
Vinita.
Vinita.
Yeah.
But Vinita, as Vinita is saying, 100%. So if we're going to classify it in the same terms, we had objective morality and lack of personal responsibility. Now we've got natural ethics on my imaginary whiteboard behind my head, and a lack of interpersonal responsibility. Am I my brother's keeper is the ultimate phrase that you could use to basically say, I'm not looking after the person next to me. How can you even ask that question? Am I my brother's keeper? Of course you're your brother's keeper. Who's going to look after him if not for you? If you didn't just, kill him, he wouldn't be dead. But at the end of the day, it shows a lack of interpersonal responsibility. And that brings us to the third and final episode for the opening teaser series of the book of Bereshit, which you're going to get into the following week, right? And that's Noah and humanity. So we're going to invite a third speaker to read. It's slightly longer, not too long, but Adina did a great job and Elisheva did a great job. So we're going to see if we have any other break.
I can read.
What's your name, sorry?
Robert.
Okay, go for it, Robert.
These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man. He was perfect in his generations. Noah walked with God. Now the earth was...
I might interrupt just to
go for it. Yeah.
Process those questions. The question is, it says he was perfect in his generations. Like, what does that mean? Why doesn't it just say he was perfect? So, Rashi explains he was perfect relative to his generation, could be one way of reading it, i.e. everyone else was so bad, so it's not so hard to be that good. Or if he was able to be perfect in that generation, imagine he was in Abraham's generation or Moses' generation. Relative to them, he'd be that much better. So you could either look at it in a negative way, only relative to them, or in a positive way. Wow, if relative to them, imagine how great he could be. Carry on for us, please, Robert.
Now the earth was corrupt before God, and the earth became full of robbery.
So God saw sorry, I'm just going to jump between each verse. So this translation, the earth became corrupt before God, and the earth became full of robbery. In Hebrew, it says Hamas. Now, we may know something else called Hamas today. It's not the same thing. But basically, one interpretation is robbery, but there's different interpretations in the Gemara in Sanhedrin as to what this word Hamas refers to, what the actual, sin was that's coming. But like some say it was sexual immorality, right? People were, really not valuing any lives, raping people, doing terrible things. Some say it was robbery. Some say it was murder. So when we identify the sin in this one, we're going to more have to, and you can start thinking about it now, what is the root of every sin? So carry on, Robert.
And God saw the earth, and behold, it had become corrupted, for all flesh had corrupted its way on the earth.
Okay,
and God said to Noah.
So, it's extended beyond the individual, and it says all earth has been corrupt, all flesh. So all the people are now being corrupted. With Adam and Eve, with Noah, with Cain and Abel, it was more individualized. Now it's broadened because of the full society.
And God said to Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth has become full of robbery because of them. And behold, I am destroying them from the earth.
Okay, God basically says this is beyond the point of no return. It's very sad, but I'm gonna have to push massive reset. We're gonna have to reset the entire world and everything and everyone that's within it, and that's, as we know, results in the famous flood. And that flood is literally like a mikveh cleansing the entire world. And the only people that are saved are two of each animal, Noah, his family, etc. So remember we said that Hamas was the sin here of robbery. What would you guys say is the root of any sin? whether you said it was rape, whether you said it was murder, whether you said it was robbery, regardless of the opinion in Sanhedrin, what would you say is the root of any sin that ever happens?
A lack of care for anyone else but yourself.
Excellent. A lack of care for anyone else but yourself. I think that's fantastic. How would you put that into one word?
Selfishness.
Yeah.
Selfishness, exactly. Let's go back into each of those three opinions and you can apply it to any sin, right? Let's say a sin I've recently done, right? I was waiting in a highway, right? And there's a long line and like we're really late and there's a whole, lots of traffic as there sometimes is in Israel. It's not exactly like New Zealand. And essentially my father says to me, I say, let's just go around the car. And my father said, why is your time more important than all those people's time? I might have a personal reason that I want to rush now, but everyone else may have a personal reason they want to rush then. I'm basically being selfish because I'm valuing my time over anyone else. Let's go to the extreme of rape. They're basically saying, I have a certain desire. I don't care about the other person's feelings. I don't care about the long-term impact of anyone else. It's a here and now, that's what I'm doing. Let's take robbery, right? I believe that I need that item right now, regardless of what that person's opinion is. I'm going to go into their house and take it off their wall. I'm going to go into the wallet and take it out because I believe that I need this now. Let's say murder. I'm deciding that this person shouldn't exist anymore, right? I'm being the judge for everything for whatever reason. I could be paid to murder, and therefore I think that money is worth it. I could be establishing any host of reasons, any sin that I can think of. I think that, what was your name again, Mrs. White?
Vinita.
I think Vinita's correct. Selfishness is a root cause. If a sin is a symptom, right? If you're going to take, speaking badly about someone is a symptom, lashon hara, then the cause is selfishness because I feel that I need to say this now. Doesn't matter what it's going to do to them or why or whatever. So I think that's the sin. And I think that's a great definition. And I'm going to ask Robert to please read the response. And that's going to take us to the final response of the third category.
Make for yourself an ark of gopher wood. You shall make the ark with compartments, and you shall clot it both inside and outside with pitch. You shall make a skylight for the ark, and to a cubit you shall finish it to the top. And the entrance of the ark you shall place in its side. You shall make it with bottom compartments, second-story compartments, and third-story compartments. And I will set up my covenant with you. And you shall come into the ark, you and your sons and your wife and your sons' wives with you.
Okay, great job, Robert. So again, I wanted to pick a very detailed area because it's like, I mean, if you're an architect, I'm sure you're getting very excited here, or an interior designer. But for those of us that aren't, what's all this detail? Again, when you read through it, there's reasons for everything. That's why if you can read it with a commentary or different reading, there's so much depth here and it's incredible. But I want to ask a very simple question. Very simple question. Why did God, as a response, ask us to build an ark? I can think of many different, incredible places to take us. I could imagine God taking everyone to the Milford Sound and to create a beautiful enclosure around them, right? And we in this beautiful ecosystem, and everyone else can have the flood and create something. I can imagine God putting us on top of Mount Everest and having the flood just going to that point. I can imagine a million other ways that God could have reset the world. Why do people here think that he decided to And by the way, even the fact that we're asking this question, who's ever asked a question before? I'm sure you've all heard of the story of Noah's Ark, but how often do we actually ask this question? Again, I'm trying to get us into the mindset. There's a reason for anything and everything that happens in the Torah, and we need to try and probe it because there's incredible moral, lessons that we can learn. So does anyone want to have a go at thinking why we could possibly create an ark?
Because Rabbi, previously Hashem used to water the plants and everything with a mist. I believe there was no such thing as a rain or a thing like that. This time it was going to rain, and it was going to rain so long that it was going to flood. And the best way to protect his chosen animals and his family was by a vessel that could act as some sort of covenant between Hashem and Noah.
So why a vessel? Why a boat? Why that vessel?
I have a theory. I'm thinking this, that could it be that because Noah had to physically build something, it might have caused people around him to wonder, what is this man really doing? And thereby give people a chance to ask and maybe repent.
Okay, well, I think you should change your name to Rashi, because one of the medieval commentators, the most classic commentator on the Chumash, actually brings that down from the Midrash, and he says that the reason it took so long, right, which is what you're taking on, it took 100 years to build this ark, right? Obviously, it took a while because it was just Noah and his family, but why didn't they just, like, God just lift them up onto Mount Everest, as I said, or ask them to climb a high mountain and then have that area? And he says the reason is because he wanted to do two things. Number one, give other people a chance to repent, as you said. And number two, give Noah a chance to bring other people and to talk about it and have a conversation. Imagine you're walking past, you're walking downtown Auckland and you see this guy building a massive boat in his backyard. Okay, you might think it's a bit weird. And then you see how huge this edifice is. I'm sure you'd say, like, what is that? What are you doing? Right? And when you ask what you're doing, you should be able to understand that. But again, the selfishness was so pervasive that people didn't care what someone else was doing. And Noah was even selfish, according to that first opinion, right? That he didn't go out of his way to help anyone else. So that's a beautiful answer. And I want to add one layer to it. And that is why I think it was an ark. And I want to answer this by sharing a midrash that's brought in Leviticus Rabbi in a different place completely that made me think of this. And the midrash says that there's a group of people on a boat, and each person paid a lot of money to sit on their boat. And this guy is two rows, he's sitting on his boat and they're paddling and they're moving, etc. And he hears in the background, someone drilling a hole. And he goes back, I apologize for the noise. And he goes back and he hears in the background someone drilling a hole. And he goes, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm drilling a hole." And he says, "What do you mean?" He says, "I'm drilling a hole. I paid a lot of money for the seat and I can drill a hole. You can do whatever you want in your seat." And the guy says to him, "Don't you realize that if you drill a hole under your seat, we all drown?" And I think it's a powerful lesson that made me think of Noah's Ark, because at the end of the day, for two reasons. Number one, if you want to build a microcosm of society, realizing the importance and the responsibility that we have for one another, then it's a boat. Because with a boat, every single plank is dependent on the other. One faulty plank lets it down for everyone. You want to drill a hole, everyone sinks. We're all in the same boat together. We're all in the same ark together. And I think it's a powerful antidote that God is giving to humanity. And he's sensitizing Noah for over 100 years to build the ark so that everyone can ask the question. And then a significant period on the ark to live in this way. And number two, who are the people that were with him on the ark besides his family? They weren't people. They were animals. All those different flaws that we read about, that Robert read, were different flaws for different purposes. One was just for waste. Can you imagine how much waste there is from two animals of every type, right? Worse than that, can you imagine having to clean the poo from an elephant? Can you imagine having to feed a tiger, do all these things? It's going to take your entire day, right? This massive zookeeper. And essentially what you're doing is you're learning to sensitize yourself to even animals that can't say thank you. They can't ask for anything. If you can be sensitive to animals, to clean their waste and to feed them and to help them. Say hi, yourself. My daughter, right? If you can be sensitive to every type of animal, how much more so to other people? Yeah. So it's not just that you're in an ark that everyone's dependent on each other. You have to look after people and things and animals that can't even relate to you, that are so different from you. How much more so different people around the world? And I think that was the antidote that was trying to be built. And I think it's such a powerful idea. And that therefore brings us to the end of Act 3, Scene 3. If the first was personal responsibility, if the second was interpersonal responsibility, I would call the third collective responsibility, right? The first is about me, myself. If I'm doing something wrong, I need to take responsibility for it.
Mm.
The second is caring about my neighbor, someone around the corner, my family, my friends, people that I can relate to. The third is collective, societal, beyond my friends and family, those people that I may not even know. And if the first, and I think that's a powerful idea that we can each consider when we're dealing with these elements. And how does it come off? If this collective responsibility is the antidote that's built through the ark, what is the cause? I think if the first is a lack of personal responsibility, the second is a lack of interpersonal responsibility. This is a lack of both. And when you have a lack of both, you get to a collective irresponsibility. And I want to end with one powerful word. Again, I wish I had, I can actually write it on pen and paper. Do people know a bit of Hebrew if I just say what the letters are? Does everyone know the letters?
Yeah.
Does anyone not? Okay, good. So if anyone doesn't, feel free to let me know. I don't have Hebrew on this computer, but Noah, maybe write for me in the chat the word achrayut. Aleph, chet, resh, yud, vav, taf. So
Sure.
basically, the word achrayut means responsibility in Hebrew. And for me, it encapsulates exactly what we described and discussed, and it's going to conclude this fantastic lesson together. If anyone wants to turn on their cameras so I can see those that are off, feel free. If you don't want to, feel free not to. But basically, achrayut, right, responsibility, if you can see it in the chat, the first letter is Aleph, okay? The Aleph refers to ani, refers to anachi, to refers to me. If you just take the Aleph, it refers to myself. You want to be a successful, responsible person, it starts with yourself. The famous story is told about Rabbi Yisrael Salanta, who was the founder of the Musar movement. And he said that he wanted to change the world. When he realized he couldn't change the world, he wanted to try to change his country. When he couldn't realize he couldn't change his country, he tried to change his society. When he couldn't change his society, he tried to change his community. And when he couldn't change his community, he tried to change his friends. And when he couldn't change his friends, he tried to change his family. And when he couldn't change his family, he tried to change himself. And he actually succeeded in that. And when he changed himself, it started to have an effect on his family. And when his family changed, it started to affect on his community. And when his community changed, so did society, and so on and so forth. And that's what changed the world. The only way you can be responsible and change the world starts with yourself. We just started a new year. Each of us have ways that we can change in little ways. We discussed in the last incredible lesson, if you remember, Kivnei Maron, talking about the sheep and the slope and the soldiers in King David's army. What are we willing to fight for? Where is in intellectual humility? And are we moving and growing through life, or are we just going through life?
Yeah.
This is a time to solidify that. I said by the end of Sukkot, we should solidify it. We're coming towards that time. It's now, right? What are the areas in our own lives we can improve and we can be better? Because that's the only way you can influence society. It starts with Aleph, it starts with me, it starts with you. Im ein ani li mili, says Hillel. If I'm not for myself, who is for me? You can take responsibility for yourself. The next letter, if you look at the next letter, it's a chet. Aleph and chet spells the word ach, right? If the first was Adam and Eve, myself, personal responsibility. The second is the prototypical ach, the first siblings in humanity, which was Cain and Abel. Am I my brother's keeper? You have to take responsibility for your sibling, for your family, for the people that are closest to you, to your community. Because if you don't, no one's going to. I hope that if we're asked, am I my brother's keeper? Am I my sister's keeper? Our answer is going to be yes. And that's the only way that we can counter what we saw with the lack of interpersonal responsibility, what Cain and Abel lacked. And that's why the second letter in the word achrayut, responsibility, is ach. Because this next layer, once we've mastered ourselves, is to worry about our family, our friends, our community. The people that are in this Zoom that you know, to give them a call before Shabbos and check in on them. Our siblings, our parents, those that we're close to take responsibility for them. If someone's having a hard time, to try and help them out and be there for them. Then the third and final letter of the first three, because there's two triads here, is acher. Acher means the other. Aleph, me. Ach, my sibling. Acher, the other. That's the third episode that we talked about. Collective responsibility. Not just our friends, not just our family, not just ourselves, but people outside of our immediate sphere. We need to take responsibility for the acher. For the, it's interesting. We say, "V'samachta b'chagecha," you should be happy on Sukkot. V'ayita ach sameach, and that will make you truly joyous. How? It says, "V'ager v'yatom v'almana with the person that's a widow, that's a stranger, that's an orphan, that doesn't have family, that doesn't have friends. They're not in your direct contact. But the only way we can truly experience joy, says Judaism, is by including the other, by including those people that are outside of us. I'm flying in 2 weeks to Eswatini. Eswatini used to be called Swaziland. It's just above South Africa, to help the country there with their vaccine drive, right? Because the religious leaders there, basically they said that, if you wanted to influence America, so you get Beyonce or Kim Kardashian to take a photo, having a shot. But in Eswatini, their influencers are tribal leaders and they're pastors. So I'm going to meet with the religious leaders of Eswatini to try and help them understand, what does it mean, that you should truly guard yourself, and the importance of physical health. And they wanted a rabbi from the Holy Land to learn from. Okay, I'm definitely not, this is the Holy Land, but I'm not what they think, but it's an opportunity. What do the people in Swaziland that I've never met with have to do with me as a Jew? And the answer is everything. They're the acher. If I can share anything I can to help them, right? Like you guys are my achim. You're my brothers and sisters. We're all part of this Jewish community, even if we're on the other side of the world. So the first three represent Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, Noah and humanity, Aleph, myself, Ach, those around me in the broader sphere, and Acher, the broader. How do you do that? So the last three letters give us a clue to that. The first is Acharai. Add the Yud and you get to the word Acharai, right? Acharai, for anyone that knows the Israeli army, right, is a very famous saying. I can see Noam is nodding his head. I'm sure he's heard it once or twice, right? Acharai, traditional armies, the commanders sit in the control center and they tell the soldiers where to go, because then they're protected and they can have a broader sight. In the Israeli army, the commander goes in first and he says, Acharai, after me. And the morale and the leading by example changes all the difference. You want to lead a life of responsibility? The only way to do it is to say Acharai, after me, is to live it yourself, is to take the first step in the right direction, is to, if anything inspired you in this shiur, to get off and to literally decide between now and the end of the week, one way for the Aleph, for myself, one way for the Ach, and one way for the Acher. Acharai, go and live it by example. How do you do that? One of the ways is Acharav. You add the Vav, you add the second last letter, and you get Acharav. Acharav means after him, or after her, or after them. You need to have role models in your life. The role model in your life could be the incredible shlichim that decided to come to the other side of the world to come and learn with you and grow and create these opportunities. It could be some random guy speaking with a funny accent in Jerusalem to just spark an idea. It could be your parent. It could be a teacher. It could be a friend. It could be Martin Luther King. It could be Rabbi Sachs. It could be, who are the role models in your life that you look up to? And try and think about why, right? What's one, it could be, as I said, a short encounter, and what did I learn from that? And it could be more of a living example that they bring. And to say Acharav, because if you can see an example of someone, right, or something that you aspire towards, it helps you actualize it more. Famously, when Yosef, right, Joseph, you'll see, because everyone's going to learn the parasha together. If you guys do it, we'll learn more together, right? And we're going to have lots of questions to discuss. It's going to be really fascinating. But when Joseph was, with Potiphar's wife, Joseph basically got sold into slavery. He finds himself as a slave to a guy called Potiphar, and Potiphar's wife comes and seduces him. Now, here's this like slave boy. He's like dirty and he's been like, nothing. He was a very handsome guy, but he's like, a nothing, worthless person, a slave. And this beautiful queen of the house, this stunning woman who owns the house, who can give him everything, right? Basically seduces him. And he knows, on the one hand, he really wants to go for this. That has this interesting, if you guys really want to go in depth, you look at the note on top of the word. It's called a shalshelet. A shalshelet goes, how we sing the Torah. It only happens, I think, 4 or 5 times in the entire Torah. It goes la 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 la. Right? It goes up and down, up and down. Rabbi Sachs calls it the music of ambivalence, because he's not sure. Here's a huge opportunity here. I can have food, I can have drink, I can fulfill my desires, I can do something, be like more of a normal person in society, on the one hand. On the other hand, this is morally wrong. She's a married woman. This isn't what a good Jewish boy does, right? He was Yosef HaTzadik. And what stops him? The Midrash says that he has an image of his father. He has an image of Jacob. And he knows that his father would not approve of this. By the way, some people like to say that he looked into the mirror, saw his reflection, and he hadn't seen his reflection for so long, and he'd now grown up a bit. And when he saw himself, he saw his dad in himself because he actually looked like him. Whatever the interpretation is, he had an acharav. He had an after him. He had someone, a living example that he could aspire towards. And that held him in that moment of potential sin to do what he thought was morally right. And from that moment on, he went down even deeper into the jail. And then life's, shone forward. He became the viceroy of Egypt and the most amazing things. And it was sometimes, as the Fray say, I don't know if you guys listen to the Fray, the band, but sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same. But you need an acharav, you need a living example, or a friend you can discuss things with, right? Not all of us are in jail and we have to see an image in our head. You can actually go and speak to these people, to reach out and to say, this is what I'm thinking. This is a life decision. I'm not sure my child wants this. I want that. I'm not sure if this is morally appropriate. I don't know or I'm just deciding this life decision. Speak it out, have an acharav. And finally, the final letter is tough, which makes the whole word, which brings achrayut. Achrayut meaning responsibility. Interesting, the first letter is aleph and the last letter of tough, which is the first letter of the alphabet and the last letter of the alphabet. It's the A to Z, the aleph to tough of responsibility is all encapsulated in this word. It really summarizes the entire shir that we just discussed together. And just to conclude, we talked about first and foremost, I'll first mention one idea. The last letter of the word Yisrael, which is what we're going to read now, the last letter of the entire Torah is a lamed. The first letter of the entire Torah is a bet for Bereshit. Now, in any linear text, you open and you look, and you close the book and it finishes. But that's a linear text. The Torah is cyclical. It's a cycle. We read it together now again, even if you're in your 90s and if you're reading it for the first time, and it's the first time you've ever seen it, right? And you need to look at it anew with a fresh start. If it was a linear text, the last letter is lamed. But if it's a cyclical text, it's not the last letter. It's actually the middle letter of the entire text. And the next letter is bet. What does lamed bet make? Lev, heart. Because the heart of Jewish continuity is the capacity to continue to learn. And if we don't learn, we can't sustain ourselves and we can't sustain our society. So I encourage you guys to even just do this week's parasha. And if you don't want to do anything, I'm some random guy that's speaking with an Australian accent from Israel. Feel free not to. Take anything you want from this. No pressure anyway. But ultimately, we started off by asking interesting questions that can start thinking, why does it say Ayeka? Where are you? Why does it say that you're surely going to die, but they don't die after they do that? All these interesting questions, every letter, every word, we can see many incredible opportunities. We started talking about the lack of personal responsibility. The first people that were ever asked, they said, you can eat anything except for this. And what do? We go straight for that, right? And based on that, God said not to, objective morality. There's some things that we need to have the intellectual humility like a sheep to understand that there's certain things beyond us that we just can't do because they're not right for us. And we've got to trust, so there has to be a broader trust in that. And then the response is a lack of personal responsibility. The man blames the woman blames the serpent, each blames each other. And that's just how it goes. We need to take personal responsibility, not blame anyone else, and say for ourselves, if I'm not for myself, who is for me? Then we get to the next part, which is Cain and Abel, right? The first siblings, they kill one another. One kills the other, and they say, am I my brother's keeper? They lack interpersonal responsibility. The rest, after we say, if I'm not for myself, who is for me? The next part of the verse of Hillel is, Ukshe'ani latzmi ma'ani. If I'm only for myself, if I'm selfish, what am I? What kind of person am I? I've got to worry about those people around me, right? I've got to worry about my brother, my sister, my family, my community. And then we got to the next one, which is Noah and the generation, the capacity on a collective level. Once it gets that bad, you have to reset the generation, right? Unfortunately, these ills are pervasive across the generation. Unfortunately, there's too many reset buttons going on. And if only society could look after one another and be there for one another, it could make such a difference. That is encapsulated with the aleph being myself, with the ach being siblings, with acher, with the other. And by doing it, we should take acharai, after me, acharav, find someone to be after, and acharayut, the aleph to tough of responsibility. And the way to be able to really articulate as a metaphor level, this is Noah's Ark, which we had to look after animals, which can never help us. They can't even speak to us, to look after things that we can never really relate to, and realize that every plank is dependent on one another. We're all in the same boat together. And as we start this new year in the Sukkah in Jerusalem, as you guys join me here from New Zealand. And we start with this incredible opportunity to relearn the Torah. I give us a bracha, a blessing as we started on this auspicious day of Hoshana Rabbah, the final day of Sukkot, that each and every one of us have the capacity to encapsulate all of these levels, to identify what we can do as the Aleph for ourselves, for others, and for the broader perspective, and embody responsibility. Because as Rav Yisrael Salanta said, if he could do it for himself, he was able to change the world. And if over 50 of us between all the different Zoom screens in the session can take it on ourselves, I'm sure together we can truly change the world. Shana Tova, Chag Sameach, and thank you so much.
Thank you. That was really good.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Shana Tova.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Shana Tova.
Thank you.
Beautiful, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi Benji.
Just amazing.
Thank you all for joining.
Thank you for organizing this.
Thank you.
Yes.
See you
Thank
guys.
you. It was
Bye,
wonderful.
everyone.
Bye.
Can I just say about Eswatini? I was in communication with a Jewish woman there not so very long ago who must be thrilled to know that you're coming. Have you got a Jewish contact there?
She doesn't know I'm coming. I'm going with an organization called Israel Aid, which helps people in humanitarian relief. But if you can send me her details, I'd love to meet her while I'm there.
I will do so.
And I'll send you guys in the chat maybe. Yeah.
I'm gonna say, Rabbi, because last time you sent in the chat your website, and a few people spoke to me after the class and said that they really enjoyed getting on your website and seeing the different things. So if everyone goes now into the chat, you'll be able to see Rabbi just posted and a lot of really good things.
No, so what I just posted is actually, if you want to start with creation for this week. So I just wrote a 2-page idea. You can click download the PDF and then a 1-minute film if you guys want. But there's amazing resources out there. Looking forward to continuing the journey. If the person can send Noam and Elisheva or myself, the person in Eswatini's details, I'd love to meet them when I'm there. I'm there for 3 days. And then I'm going to South Africa actually. And I'd love to come to New Zealand, but I can't get in. Actually, maybe I can because I'm Australian. It's a 2-week quarantine. But maybe when you guys come to Israel, looking forward to hosting you in my sukkah next year.
Amazing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rabbi. Chag Sameach.
Hag Sameach,
everyone.
Bye.
Soon, hopefully.
Thanks, Elisheva, Noam.
Thank you,
Nice.
guys. Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
Yom Tov, Arav. Thank you, guys. Chag Sameach.
Bye, everyone.